and you're missing all the lack of sales, right?
Because you're not really focused on that. Yeah, like why didn't somebody buy?
That's right. When someone leaves your company without the sale, right, whatever it may be, service industry, mainly, that why they left empty-handed is profoundly helpful information.
Yeah, look, that's it's a really good reminder to investigate the things that we're not really seeing. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall, where we throw ideas, see what sticks, and nurture those that do. I'm your host, Armando Leduc, an actor, entrepreneur, and coach, giving you insights that light up your world. We're here to explore the realms of business, marketing, and life, serving up a shot of inspiration with every episode. Ready to make ideas stick and grow them into something great? Let's dive in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are consuming this podcast. Spaghetti on the Wall, back with another one. Dr. Kevin Ryder, how are you?
I'm doing well this morning. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks for being here. So I got the privilege of meeting you, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and we got to talking about the whole process of what Human Factors is, and he's the owner and operator of Human Factors Consulting, where you come in and help with testimony for personal injury cases and how things are or how cases are settled from the perspective of, the human factor, right? And so I thought it was an interesting just paradigm shift for me because, I work with attorneys, but I didn't really understand this particular thing about it. And then he started sharing stories. So we'll get into the storytelling, but I really want to know about like your background. How did you get involved in it? And how'd you become this person?
Well, certainly I appreciate that and the intro and everything else. I love that we had this basically 5-minute scheduled call, last week or whatever it was, and turned into 30. And I appreciate everything you're doing. The podcast seems great as I've looked into it a little bit. So I appreciate what you're doing as well. And thanks for having me on board here.
Thanks.
So I started Forensic Human Factors then about 12 years ago. And brought a couple other experts into the company since then. It's a nationwide consulting firm. We get hired by attorneys to investigate then personal injury cases. A lot of them tend to be these catastrophic car and truck crashes. And we'll kind of get into some of those details. But I often get asked, like, how did you get into this? And I would encourage, no one should set out to become an expert witness. Now, I will tell you, it's a tremendous blessing and opportunity. I love what I do. I love that it seems most weeks my work actually has a benefit in someone else's life. There's only so many jobs. There's a lot of jobs out there like that. But I'm really thankful for the ability to do that. And ultimately, I would encourage any of your listeners is kind of decide what that next step in your life looks like. What do you want to do next? Because it's the next step that matters, not where you might want to be in 5 or 10 steps. You always get that question growing up. What do you want to be, 5-10 years from now? What do you want to do when you're 30? So for me, it really was. I was in an undergraduate industrial engineering degree, and I had one class in human factors, and it happened to just resonate with me. Like it just made so much sense. And I kind of followed up with like another elective that was similar. And really, as I was graduating with my bachelor's degree, I was aware my school, University of Tennessee in Knoxville, had a master's degree in human factors as a primary concentration. And I was like, I want to learn more. So that was the next step for me. And so I got my master's degree then in human factors, also a side of manufacturing. So there's kind of just that safety environment. A lot of human factors tends to be safety related. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But so again, I took the master's degree. I finished that and I was done with school, or so I thought. I swore off, so I never wanted to be in a classroom again. That was a lot of school. And so I got an opportunity, just a great job, just irrelevant for today, but it was really nice. I worked that for a couple of years, and life just kind of pulled me back into wanting more education. I was finding in my job that I needed tools to do my job that didn't exist yet. And it was really frustrating. And so basically I got this idea. That's what PhDs are for. I mean, you get a PhD, which basically establishes to other people that in one sense you kind of know what you're talking about in your field. But more importantly, you know how to construct an experiment, at least in engineering. You can construct an experiment that produces reliable results that can be useful and interpreted. And so that's all my degree says, is I know how to do that. And so, we went through that program. I love teaching. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this morning. I love talking about what I do, right? So being a professor was then the next obvious step for me. Like, give me a microphone and a classroom and people who can't leave the room. They're a captive audience. And so I did that for 5 years. And at West Virginia University in Morgantown. I got my PhD from the University of Michigan, for anyone that cares. About half the country applauds that, the other half hates it. And maybe those percentages are off significantly. But anyway, while I was a professor, then I started getting some phone calls from attorneys. And they had a case that related to safety and human factors. And I remember that first call. It's like, well, Dr. Ryder, I've got this situation, this injury. And told me a little bit more, and they said, "Well, do you know about that?" And I remember my response is, "Well, yes, I teach that 3 days a week, so I'd be happy to talk with you more." And so ultimately that turned into a case. A guy got his finger severed trying to stow the third row of his minivan. Like, he was just folding it down, and the way that this particular model was designed, the strap that he was holding onto to pull the third row down, the whole thing just fell with gravity. The strap wasn't long enough, and it yanked his hand down into the well between the seat and the inside of the bumper. Yes. And lost half his finger. So, I'm glad I have all 10 of mine, not 9.5. But, so he was a really nice guy. I did have a chance to meet him. And so it turned out that, I'm an engineer. I love to solve puzzles, problems. A bit of a nerd that way. And so as a couple other attorneys kept calling me, I realized why I love teaching. And I was doing research, but it was really the same research kind of every day, each year. It was a little just redundant, repetitive. I don't want to say monotonous, but it wasn't fulfilling in that role. And so I decided to leave the university, took a full-time job with the company doing this kind of work. Was there for 2 years, 2.5 years. And then started my own company after that. Just knowing that I love this. I can do this. I believe so. Thankfully, I was right, I guess, so far. 12 years. We'll see if I get to 13. But that's at least my path. And again, every path is different. It happens to be that each step I took kind of led to the next one. And by the time there was an attorney who wanted help with a case, I had seen kind of each of the parts of his case in various parts of my life. And I kind of feel like that's with anyone as we just progress through our lives and our work. We take that next job, whether it's a promotion or with a different company doing different kind of work. Sometimes we control that process, and sometimes, unfortunately, as we lose jobs, that process gets thrust on us. But still the same, I think, same internal question. Maybe even when you kind of, got to where you are now, what did that look like? Each step led to the next.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. I'll try to keep my answers a little shorter as we move forward, but
no worries.
You kind of open the door, tell me about yourself. There you go.
Sometimes you got to know what the backstory is, right, to move forward.
Truly.
So you help personal injury attorneys on helping them settle cases for their clients, and in so doing, they bring you in to make sure that what they're saying about the negligence is valid, and that as a result of your testimony, they can get more compensation for their clients. Is that correct?
Ooh. I was with you right up until the end. So attorneys have fascinating jobs, but in one sense, it is very, very different from mine. And I mean this respectfully, they're out to win. That is their job. If they're a plaintiff attorney working for someone who's filed a complaint for injuries, damages, and they're trying to recover money, and really hopefully they're trying to maximize the recovery for the client. But then you have the defendant on the other side. They're being sued. In one sense, they don't want to pay money. I mean, no one really does. It's like trying to raise taxes. Like most people are kind of against it, but it just depends on the circumstances. So I actually will work with either of them. It really depends who calls me. And then when they do, I evaluate their side of the case and whether I can support their side. Sometimes I just have to say no. I don't want to say like the wrong side calls me. But that is the reality sometimes. Sometimes a plaintiff, they don't really have an argument that my background supports, and I just have to tell them, I can't help them. And other times it does. So my job's not necessarily to maximize recovery or for the plaintiff, nor is it to minimize the payout of the defendant. My job is to educate the jury so that they can properly assign the responsibility. So I actually don't win or lose any case. It would seem that I do a good, ethical, thorough job. My repeat business tends to be pretty high, which is, I suppose, an indirect testimony to the work I do. But I actually don't care who wins or loses. I'm not necessarily invested in this. And the nature of human factors, it really is everything that leads up to the incident. So I don't deal with the medical, the medical bills, the surgeries. Sometimes I'm not even certain, as I think about the case, whether they lived or died. There's unfortunately a lot of cases that are tragedies. Probably last I looked, about 1 in 4 of the cases I handle has a fatality in it. And probably another fourth at least, really permanent disabling of disability or injury in some way. So, yeah, they're life-changing circumstances. But my most favorite attorneys to work with, despite their professional burden to advocate for their clients, is when they're really just out for justice. If someone is injured, our system is set up where they can be compensated. And if they don't want to pay right away on their own, they can get sued. In the same sense, a defendant shouldn't have to pay more than's reasonable. I really enjoy helping people understand what I would say is the kind of the truth of the situation for them to make an informed decision.
You were telling me a story on the last call. I want to revisit that story because it was definitely interesting. Tell the viewers about the if you can. I don't know if are you allowed?
Well, I have no idea what we talked about. I've probably reviewed 5 cases since we talked.
Gotcha. So it was the lady that fell into the hole in her closet?
Yeah, truly. So yeah, that is fully resolved. There was a verdict. I don't know if it was done when you and I had talked. Fascinating as it is. So this couple had lived in their house for 35 years. It was a one-story home. It was very nice. And the sump pump, it's basically a 5-foot deep hole, where the sump pump, so it pumps out water when the foundation, gets intruded with water. It was in the back of their master bedroom closet. This is this walk-in closet. I forget how deep it was, maybe at least 10 feet deep. So you walk in, you make a right turn, and you're walking back toward the back of this walk-in closet. It's got dark carpet. And so in 25 years, it was the last time that they had ever seen that the sump pump lid had been removed, had been off. The husband had gone in there 25 years ago. Basically, since then, it's just a closet. And the wife goes in there, probably every day, right? To get dressed. And so she's walking in there and she's putting her husband's clothes away. And she falls in the hole. So the problem is, there was a contractor doing work on the house, renovating a bathroom on the other side of the house. But also in that hole was the main shutoff for water for the house. So the contractor had to go in there, open the lid, it's a 50-pound lid, and to shut off the water to the house and then go do the work. And unfortunately, even though they turned the water back on and had everything ready, they didn't put the lid back. All right, so now you have in the back of this closet this hole. The lid's removed, and they haven't seen this hole. There's no recollection it even exists, and then we have the problem that the wife never uses the closet light when she goes back there. She can see well enough to put her clothes away, to get whatever she might want out of it. The front half of the closet's decently well lit, and the further you go back, the darker it gets. And the problem is the back where the hole is. There's very little light. There's enough light to see kind of the clothes that are hanging and to put back the ones you're trying to put there. But unfortunately, she testified she never uses the closet light because she doesn't need to put her clothes away. And she walks back there in the morning of the incident, and she falls in there. Very, very sad. Now, that's where the case actually gets interesting. So everything I just said is actually not the interesting part. And then so I'll move on briefly then. We have this issue is as she fell into the hole, she cracked one of the pipes and water started to come out, and it started to fill up the hole. And so she's in there. Her physical medical damages actually weren't significant. If I recall, it's like 3 fractures to her leg. Painful, but in terms of medical bills, not horrific. But now she's there. I believe she's 78 years old, and she can't get out. And the water's beginning to fill up. She's yelling now for her husband, who's asleep in the other side of the house. So she's yelling. Eventually he does wake up. He does hear her, comes to help, and he's about the same age. He can't get her out. So they're right around, each 78 years old, and she's in this well. He calls 911, and now they're just waiting for the emergency responders to show up. And the water is slowly filling up, ankles, knees, hips. It gets up to her chest. And this is where, and at this point, the first responders show up and they rescue her. They pull her out, so she's just fine. But, so now you have the case itself. And so what are they suing for? Well, basically, it's an emotional stress, pain and suffering. There's various ways we talk about it. She was in a hole for estimated about 30 minutes as the water is slowly filling up. She believes that she is about to drown. And on top of that, the husband is on top, can't get her out. He believes he's about to watch his wife of however many, I actually don't recall. They've been there for 35 years. His wife for a very long time. He believes he's about to watch her drown right in front of him. And there's nothing they can do about it. And so 30 minutes of just terror. So I don't know how you put a number on that. That's a jury's burden. But ultimately they actually did. It's a verdict, it's public, so I don't mind sharing it. So they awarded them the damages of $440,000. But then it's reduced. So the jury found that the contractor was 70% responsible for this incident, and they also found that she was 30% responsible. Mainly because she could have turned the light on. Had she turned the light on, she would have seen it. This wouldn't have happened. But ultimately, the contractor created the hazard, left it in the dark. It was a predictable event in that regard. So the plaintiff's being 30% responsible reduces the award by 30%. So the $440,000, whatever the math is, I believe it's $308,000 is then what goes to the plaintiff, paying off then the attorneys and other expenses. But yeah, there you go. So I lied. I said my last answer, I tried to have shorter answers, but you keep asking me these questions.
No worries. Did you, now, the 70-30, is that because of your testimony?
So the honest answer is I have no idea necessarily. Sometimes I do get feedback, and the attorney, did acknowledge that. So my testimony of what occurred and why was a key part to how they were able to reach their determination. He was very pleased, which is always nice. But the reality is that they have to come to that determination on their own. My job, having been retained by the plaintiff in that case, was to explain, investigate how much illumination, how much light was in there, the contrast, the ability for someone to see basically in the dark, practically, and then contrast is another human factor, if you will, about how to see things. So if you have a white sheet of paper on a black desk, we would call that high contrast. You'd be able to see the piece of paper pretty well. But what if you turn the lights out? It's a dark room at night. You can't see that white sheet of paper on the black table very well. So we know lighting matters, and then the difference in color or shades of gray matter. And then also, as you're looking back, unfortunately, it's a dark carpet with then a hole, which is dark. And there's basically nothing that, it's conspicuity. It's whether something's conspicuous or grabs your attention. And ultimately, with the lights off, there's nothing that would have alerted her or grabbed her attention or been conspicuous to make her realize that there was a hole there. And that's ultimately where it comes back to. You have someone that creates a hazard in the cases I deal with, and then basically, is it reasonable? Should someone see it? Did they have time to avoid it? Which is a lot of the car and truck crashes I investigate. Was there enough time for a driver to avoid a situation, a collision?
Good segue into that next question of like the driver distraction and how dangerous it is, but that people still do it. and why do they still do it?
Truly. I think the word I like is ubiquitous. I think that's right. So, driver distraction is ubiquitous in our country. It is this pandemic, basically. So let me back up a little bit real quick. So distracted driving really is it's another part of human factors. And so the science of human factors is practically about 100 years old. It really came out, developed as a science from airplanes in basically the First World War. And it's a fascinating story for someone else at a later time to go investigate. It's really interesting. But ultimately, it's really the science of how people...
Is that about the holes in the plane?
Oh, you know that one. So it's separate, but that is connected as well. That was. Let's come back to that one. I think your listeners would enjoy that.
Yeah.
But basically, the science really relates to how people perceive and react to the environment around them. So illumination and contrast, conspicuity, these different visibility and attention issues, and then we use the results of research and data to basically design safer systems. So as we get into the driving environment, anyone knows you got to pay attention while you're driving. Everyone knows that it's dangerous to not pay attention while you're driving. And most people understand that texting while driving is bad and dangerous. And yet, practically as many as half of Americans still text and drive.
I bet you it's more than that.
I bet it is. Those are the people that admit to it, right?
Yes.
But we know part of this is if you ask someone, a group of people, if they think it's dangerous to text while driving, you get this, this mix of answers. Like I know it's, and I'm just making up answers that you can understand. I know it's dangerous, but it's not all that bad. Like I feel like I can text and pay attention to the road. I would say that's a general mentality that people probably don't want to agree with, but it's also kind of why they do it. But then when you ask the question, how comfortable are you when you're a passenger for the driver to be texting while driving?
Yeah.
And so that's 10%. So basically 90% of passengers are against drivers texting while driving.
100%.
But drivers, it's okay. So it's really this it can't happen to me Superman type complex that we have, believing that we are more capable of doing things than we actually are. And so then kind of going back to your question, why do people do this? If we all know it's dangerous, why do we still do it? And the research has come out that's most clear about it is we call it expectancy. So you develop expectations based on prior experiences. And so what happens is every time someone drives and texts and doesn't hit something, it basically reaffirms this false belief that they can do it safely. And so you build this over time, over days, weeks, months, and years, where we engage in these secondary tasks. We take a phone call, we make a phone call, we send a text, we change the radio, we talk to someone in the back seat. There's all these different kinds of things that there's a lot of research to evaluate the effects of each one of them. But ultimately, as we do things, these secondary tasks, and nothing bad happens, we think we can. We believe we can do it safely. Yes. And the reality is it's just math. It's just probability and statistics. The fact is you haven't hit anything because there didn't happen to be something in that moment right in front of you. Because had that iconic boy chasing the ball in the street, had that occurred, the car would have hit him. When your attention, visual, manual, cognitive attention is not focused on the driving task, we're slower in detecting things. We're slower in deciding the appropriate action. We're slower in actually executing that action. And I see it basically every week, some version of those things.
Oof. Yeah, man. And that's just the expectation. But I mean, I guess they take that. That's not just a driving issue. It's probably everything issue, right? Like whatever risky behavior people are engaging in, if they are engaging in the risky behavior and the expectation that nothing bad happened, well, then it just further gives them confirmation bias that they can continue that risky behavior and nothing's going to happen.
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's truly objective who would say that drinking alcohol and driving is okay.
Right.
At this point in our society, we generally acknowledge that is terrible and dangerous. So why do people still do it? Right? It's the same logic fallacy. Like it kind of makes sense, but we know it's wrong. And also they believe they can. Like I've only had one drink. I can drive just fine. And they have no self-awareness of how much worse their driving is when they've had a drink. And thankfully, for many of these people, they haven't killed anybody yet. Is really the ... yet, right?
Right.
It happens just every day, all over the country, and so it ties back into a couple different auto insurance carriers have these dongles that they can offer you. You can install it in your car. It tracks your driving. And they give you like the safe driving discount. Like if you think you're a safer driver, you can get this. It'll record it, and so if you're a safer driver than average, it will actually reduce your rates. Yes, and hopefully people can see you because it makes sense. Like this is brilliant. So then, it is in fact a great idea for safer drivers. It makes sense for them to pay lower premiums. However, the entire it's a marketing campaign, and it's brilliant for the auto carriers because if you go into a large lecture hall, and I've done it, I've done it myself. It's like raise your hand if you think you're an above average driver, and it'll be like 90% will raise their hands, and that's why you're just like, well, 40% of you are lying or wrong. Like we have this belief that we are better drivers than we actually are. Now, some are, of course, there are safe drivers out there. I commend them all. But for the most part, these auto carriers are just making so much money, playing on our self-affirming, prideful beliefs that we're really good at driving. And then you start looking at the statistics. Okay, so how many times am I hard braking, or steering aggressively, or speeding excessively? You start, if you were able to objectively look at your own driving, which is what the dongles do. Most people actually end up paying a little bit more because people who think they're good drivers get these. They're actually not, and it's brilliant. Unfortunately, as it turns out, just playing on our weaknesses.
Hopefully, as you see more and more of the tech get better and better, and the self-driving becomes more and more of a thing, that'll hopefully help with the distractions. What are your thoughts on that?
So conceptually, you are correct. Right? There's no doubt. We can imagine a scenario in the future where cars recognize each other. Especially, cars, trucks, commercial trucks have, most of them have GPS, telematics. They know where their vehicles are at all times, trucking companies. And so if every car knows where it is, and if every car can communicate with every other car, they can always know where every other car is and can predict where that car will be 3 seconds from now, knows if it needs to brake, evaluate traffic signals. It's like the utopian society for cars, right? Whether we're driving them or they're autonomous, semi-autonomous vehicles. Unfortunately, I get a lot of cases with the self-driving vehicles like Teslas. because we're still at a place where the technology is tremendous. You get into it, what it's capable of doing is mind-blowing. How much data the sensors can bring in and process and decide on what to do. It really is tremendous. And when it fails catastrophically. If it doesn't see the tractor trailer in front of you. Unfortunately, one case I had, the driver, I don't recall if he was asleep or not, but literally had it on autopilot, not paying attention. It was driving, and a tractor trailer pulled out in front of it, perpendicular, right across and the car didn't detect it. The driver wasn't paying attention. He literally never saw it coming, and nor does he know what happened, because it went underneath the trailer, it killed the driver, removed the top of the vehicle, and the car kept driving for like a mile. So ended up in a field way down the road. It took him forever to find it. So wow. Tesla's come a long way.
So don't trust that yet.
Yeah. I mean, so nothing negative against Tesla necessarily in this conversation. What they do, their technology is tremendous, and a lot of these other cars, I'm getting more and more of the data and everything, how they operate. Just the nature of what I do. So it really is tremendous, but the fully autonomous, basically closing your eyes as a driver, we're not there yet. And Tesla really has had to redo some of its programming and advertising, where autopilot is no longer, hey, just turn it on and you do whatever you want. They've had to basically make it very, very clear that the driver is still responsible for the vehicle. Anyway, it's interesting to see where all that's going. My job in those cases is basically to evaluate, had it been a driver paying attention, what would have happened?
Right.
So, because is it the car's fault or is it the situation? In that case, with the tractor trailer, having investigated, any alert attendant driver would have seen it, would have braked to a stop. It was unfortunate that the truck driver pulled out, of course. That's part of the case. But Tesla had a difficulty in the case because a normal driver traveling down the road, would have been able to see and avoid. So the programming, the sensors, and the processing failed the system in that.
I wanted to backtrack because I do want to tell the story of the World War I or World War II planes and how they were, because it changed the paradigm. Right? Like, didn't it change how people were thinking about problem solving? So maybe you can tell that story.
Oh boy, I sure hope I remember it well enough. But basically, it inverted the logic. They brought these planes back, which had all these holes in the wings and the fuselage and various places on the plane. And so what they decided initially to do is that we need to put more armor, basically, in those spots because we're getting shot there. And so, they were trying to reinforce those parts of the plane. And I forget the individual who basically had the epiphany. It's like, these are the planes that are coming back. So where these planes are getting shot isn't the problem. We don't have to reinforce these. They're shooting here and we're still getting the planes back. It's the planes that we're not getting back. It's the missing data. So these planes are getting shot in these areas. Are fine. We need to reinforce the places on these planes that aren't being hit. Right. So they reinforced the places on the planes that didn't have damage. So it's like counterintuitive. And by doing so, they increased then, of course, the return on the planes and saving lives. And reminds me, I hate to get the company wrong. So either Gap or LL Bean, they transformed the blue jeans industry because people were coming and going from the stores. And they started doing a survey. When people left empty-handed, they asked them, what were you looking for? And so it probably transformed different industries, really. But so people came in and they bought things on the rack. But you don't learn anything there. I mean, you learn this is what they bought, but you don't learn what they wanted. And so when they started asking, when people left empty-handed, what were you looking for? They found out that their sizing needed to be different. The form, the shape, the comfort. We now have relaxed fit, slim fit, all the seats, the bootlegs, all these different things, which largely have been an evolution from that original research of what are people looking for that they didn't find. And so it's that same kind of counterintuitive logic. Usually you think about sales. What are we selling the most of? Let's make sure we keep those in stock. And you're missing all the lack of sales, right?
Because you're not really focused on that. Yeah, like why didn't somebody buy?
That's right. When someone leaves your company without the sale, right, whatever it may be, service industry, mainly, that why they left empty-handed is profoundly helpful information.
Yeah, look, that's it's a really good reminder to investigate the things that we're not really seeing.
I mean, despite what you and I are both doing, we need to listen. We're so engaged in sharing our opinions as people. I mean, it's not necessarily pride necessarily, but there's these thoughts in our heads and we want to share them, and for the most part, that's great. It's education in many ways. But if we're not listening, relationships end. So at any level, whether it's parenting, it's marriage, it's colleagues, it's your boss. If the boss isn't listening to the people people aren't going to stay.
Yeah.
Right. It's I think Richard Branson has a whole bunch of great quotes. It's like I'm gonna treat people so well. Let's see. I think it's train them up so that they could leave anytime they want, and treat them so well that they'll never want to leave.
Yeah.
And it's I'm kind of brutalizing the quote, but it's the same concept. So that's what we try to do. Hopefully everyone does to some extent, but and people commonly say, especially nowadays, employees are our number one priority. Well, prove it. If that's true, demonstrate it.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, that's why I love doing my podcast, because I'm just like I'm all ears, right? I'm always like, teach me something. Right. I'm always walking away from a podcast with a nugget, that I'm all like, I hadn't really thought about that. Right. I should probably start thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
For instance, I'm gonna take away from this podcast of remembering to look at things that I'm not necessarily paying attention to. Listening more, and and driving more cautiously and intentional and less distracted.
Yeah, definitely. So we have these cliches like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? There's another test everything and hold on to what is good. You don't just throw away everything. Even as an expert witness, which is how the court defines me. I'm just a consultant, but in a court case, I'm an expert witness. So there's someone often like me on the other side, and we almost categorically disagree with each other. We're also looking at slightly different parts of the equation, if you will, for the jury. But even I could just choose to ignore everything on the other side, but I can usually glean things about what they're doing and how they're doing it that can be useful to me. Anytime that we meet someone, we have the opportunity to become better people. Even people that we may not like or may not respect. There's always things we can learn. Yeah. I would encourage anyone to just keep learning. So it's keep listening.
100%.
Especially
Dr. Ryder, how do people find you?
The phone just rings. It's awesome. The website then, Forensic Human Factors, the acronym, if you will, FHF. So FHFexperts.com. It's probably the easiest way. The phone number to the company if you want, the 833-343-9778. I don't want to market too much here. I appreciate your time, but at least on the website you'll see kind of what we do, and then just briefly. So we talked about unfortunately the lady falling in the hole. We generally call those premises liability cases. So it's slips, trips, falls of any kind. So we do a lot of those. A lot of them car, truck crashes, vehicle-pedestrian collisions. A lot of those at night. A lot of products cases. So basically, so we call it the adequacy of instructions or the adequacy of warnings. Did the user know the hazard of the product. And so that's a big part. And then there's a lot of workplace safety issues, and they're always unfortunate or tragic. People losing hands and arms. So thankfully, we have a workers' compensation system in our country. So those kind of cases I see, it's when something else happened, some third party like manufacturer. So one example for products that few people know is ready-mix concrete. You buy it from a store, the bags of cement concrete, and so you pour for your driveway or a basketball goal. So we did one of those recently. It's kind of nice. So it turns out that when that gets wet and you're often in it and you're maybe on your knees and you're screening it all out, so it will actually burn you. It's caustic. It will pull water away from it. And part of this whole process is how it hardens and dries. And so, unfortunately, it's not really been very well warned. And so we have a lot of homeowners doing these projects and, hours in there doing their driveway on their hands and knees. And, if you read the bag, it says, keep it off your skin, rinse it immediately. So the warnings are there, but but people still don't understand the reality. These are, as it's pulling the moisture out of your skin, these are permanent deforming scars, burns, caustic burns. And some of them are horrible and terrible. So this is where you have a manufacturer that has a product, and they are aware of the hazards. Their job's to communicate it to us. And so that's then the whole world of instructions and warnings. Are they adequately sharing that information with us? And if they are, and we get hurt, it's on us. Like, I know that a chainsaw, when it's on, is dangerous in certain ways. If I'm then using it in poor forms, or when I touch the blade while it's moving, that's on me.
Sure.
But yeah, anyway, just the example that concrete. So I see that a couple times a year, and never fun. So it's.
Oof. Yeah. I will keep that in mind.
Indeed.
We're actually going to do some backyard concrete work. So appreciate that tidbit of information. I will keep that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Well, Dr. Ryder, we really appreciate you. Love that you were on the show. Got a lot out of it, a lot of value. And if you guys are looking, all of my personal injury law firms that are listening to this, reach out to Dr. Ryder. Fantastic guy and definitely helpful. And we appreciate you and keep watching.
Well, I appreciate your time. You have a great day, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that was Spaghetti on the Wall, brought to you by Leduc Entertainment for all of your digital marketing needs, podcasts, videos. We got you. And keep watching, keep listening. We'll see y'all next time.